So, when you look at a highly complex blueprint, like the schematics for a jet engine or something.
Oh, yeah. Everything is perfectly laid out.
Right. You see exactly how the gears turn, how the circuits connect. It's a very comforting image, honestly.
It is. You look at it and just assume the machine is this perfect logical calculator. Input leads directly to a predictable, rational output.
Exactly. And for the longest time, we've actually liked to think of human beings in exactly that way.
Yeah, that's really the classical view of human nature. Like, we weigh the costs, we calculate the benefits, and then we ultimately make the optimal choice. It's a very clean theory.
It makes intuitive sense, but then, you step into the real world of everyday human behavior, and that blueprint just goes completely out the window.
Totally out the window.
Welcome to today's Deep Dive, everyone. Today, we are looking at Dan Ariely's groundbreaking book, Predictably Irrational. Our mission here is to figure out why the bad decisions you make, like overpaying for coffee or, endlessly procrastinating on a major project, why those aren't actually random at all.
Right. They are systematic, they're measurable, and as the title suggests, they are highly predictable.
And what really grounds this whole deep dive is where the author's inquiry actually began. Because it didn't start in some dusty traditional economics classroom.
No, not at all. It started with a pretty severe personal tragedy, actually. When Ariely was 18, he was caught in an explosion.
Wow.
Yeah, it left 70% of his body covered in third-degree burns. He spent 3 long years in a hospital, and during that time, he had to endure this excruciating daily bath treatment.
Right, where the nurses would have to soak him in this disinfectant solution and then take off his bandages to scrape off the dead skin.
Exactly, and the nurses always ripped those bandages off as quickly as possible.
Because their intuition told them that a short, sharp spike of pain was just better for the patient than a really slow, drawn-out peel.
Which makes sense on paper. I mean, they had years of experience. They clearly cared deeply about their patients. They were absolutely certain this was the right way to manage the pain.
But years later, Ariely actually tested this scientifically at Tel Aviv University, right?
He did, and the data proved the exact opposite. People actually suffer significantly less when the pain is lower in intensity, but longer in duration.
So the nurses were systematically wrong.
Systematically wrong. And that realization is really the cornerstone of everything we are analyzing today. Because if highly experienced, deeply caring professionals could be so wrong about a fundamental reality and just consistently repeat that mistake without ever learning from it, well, it begs a much larger question about the rest of us.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because if we aren't the perfect rational calculators that classical economics assumes we are, how do we actually decide what anything is worth?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, like we don't have some internal value meter in our brains that just spits out the absolute intrinsic worth of a car or a meal.
No, we definitely don't. And that's because calculating absolute value requires massive cognitive load. Our brains are, well, they're evolutionary misers.
They want to save energy wherever possible.
Exactly. So instead of doing the hard math to figure out what something is fundamentally worth, the brain relies on heuristics, just cognitive shortcuts. We look for relative comparisons.
And there's a great example from the text on this. It's a real subscription ad from The Economist magazine.
Oh, I love this one.
So they offered 3 choices. Option 1 was an internet-only subscription for $59. Option 2 was a print-only subscription for $125.
Okay.
And then option 3 was a print and internet subscription for $125.
Right, so when you isolate option 2, the print, only for $125, it just looks like a typo.
Total typo. Why would anyone buy just the print version when you can get the print and web combo for the exact same price?
But Ariely tested this exact setup on MIT students. When all 3 options were presented, 84% chose the combo deal, and literally 0% chose the print only.
Which makes sense.
But then he removed that completely useless print-only option, and the preferences flipped entirely.
Really?
Yeah, 68% of people suddenly chose the cheaper $59 web option.
Yeah, that is so wild. So the psychology here explains the shortcut, right? That useless option is what behavioral economists call a decoy.
Precisely. As consumers, we have a really hard time calculating the absolute value of a $59 digital sub versus a $125 physical and digital combo. It's comparing apples to oranges.
But the brain knows for an absolute fact that the $125 combo is superior to the $125 print-only option.
Yes. The decoy exists solely to create a simple relative comparison. It artificially makes the combo deal look like a total steal.
Evaluating choices without context is kind of like a pilot trying to land a plane in pitch darkness. You desperately need those runway lights on either side of you to just guide you down.
That is a perfect analogy.
And the author even applies this to dating, which I thought was hilarious.
Oh, the dating advice is great.
He says if you are going to a singles event and you want to maximize your perceived attractiveness, you should bring along a friend who has your basic physical characteristics, but is, slightly less attractive than you.
Your friend serves as the human decoy.
Because without a comparable baseline, people struggle to evaluate your attractiveness in a vacuum. But standing next to a slightly inferior version of your own physical type, the human brain just automatically compares the two.
And you look significantly better, not just compared to your friend, but your overall perceived value increases.
Yeah.
Sorry to any friends I've dragged to parties in the past.
Right. But it goes even deeper than just choosing between two options in front of us. It turns out our brains are so desperate for a baseline that our very first impressions become permanent anchors.
Permanent anchor. So explain anchoring for us.
Well, the concept of anchoring reveals how fragile our sense of value really is. Take the story of Salvador Asale. He was known as the Pearl King.
Okay, the Pearl King.
Yeah, back in the 1970s, he had this massive supply of Tahitian black pearls, but there was zero market for them. I mean, they were grayish, they kind of looked like musket balls, and he couldn't sell a single one.
So what did he do? Did he just discount them heavily?
No, he did the opposite. He took them to his friend, the legendary jeweler Harry Winston, who put them in his Fifth Avenue window, directly next to the absolute finest diamonds, emeralds, and rubies.
Oh.
And he slapped an outrageously high price tag on them.
He basically manufactured their intrinsic value entirely out of thin air.
That's exactly what he did. Asale anchored the pearls to the finest gems in the world. And once that initial anchor was set in the public consciousness, the high prices just followed forever.
That reminds me of the book talking about the naturalist Konrad Lorenz. He observed a similar phenomenon in nature called imprinting.
Right, with the baby goslings.
Exactly. When these goslings hatch, they attach themselves to the very first moving object they see, which is usually their mother, and they just follow it loyally. Humans basically do this with prices.
We really do. We encounter a new product, we register the first price we see, and that number becomes our anchor.
I do have to push back here, though. I mean, I really struggle with this concept of arbitrary coherence. It's one thing to say a marketer tricks me by putting a pearl next to a diamond. But I refuse to believe a totally random number, something that has absolutely nothing to do with supply, demand, or the quality of a product, can permanently dictate what I'll pay for it.
It does sound like a total breakdown of logic.
Yeah.
But there is this brilliant experiment that shows just how easily the brain adopts a random number when it's searching for a cognitive life raft.
Okay, let's hear it.
Researchers asked a class of MIT students to write down the last two digits of their social security numbers.
All right.
Then they asked the students if they would pay that exact amount in dollars for various items, like a cordless keyboard or a bottle of nice wine. Finally, the students bid on those items in a live auction.
So if your social security number ended in 12, you wrote down $12. If it ended in 98, you wrote down $98.
Right. And the results show a direct causal link. The students with the highest ending digits, those from 80 to 99, bid the highest.
You're kidding.
Nope. And those with the lowest digits, 1 to 20, they bid the lowest. The top 20% bid an average of $56 for the keyboard. The bottom 20% bid an average of just $16.
So the high social security numbers bid what? Massively more?
Up to 346% more. Because their brains lacked an internal value meter for a cordless keyboard, they just grabbed onto the only number available, their own social security digit. And that random number completely bypassed their logic, acting as an anchor that dictated their perceived value.
That is unsettling. So if our brains are this heavily reliant on external comparisons to figure out value, what happens when we completely short-circuit that process?
What do you mean?
What happens when you remove the price altogether?
Oh, then you enter the deeply emotional territory of zero cost. Standard economics views zero as just another price on a continuum, right? But behavioral economics shows that zero is an entirely different psychological category.
There is an experiment that illustrates this shift perfectly. Researchers set up a table offering two kinds of chocolate: a premium Lindt truffle for 15 cents and a standard Hershey's Kiss for 1 cent.
And at those prices, consumers acted entirely rationally. 73% chose the amazing Lindt truffle, accurately calculating that it was a great bargain.
But then the researchers dropped the price of both chocolates by exactly 1 cent.
Now, standard math tells us the relative difference in price remains exactly the same. The calculation shouldn't change at all.
But the truffle is now 14 cents, and the kiss is free. Suddenly, 69% of people abandoned the premium truffle and grabbed the Hershey's Kiss.
They gave up a mathematically fantastic deal just to get something for nothing.
It's like the concept of free functions as an emotional blindfold.
Yes. From an evolutionary standpoint, every transaction involves a potential downside, right?
Yeah.
The risk of making a poor decision and losing vital resources. But when an item is free, that risk is entirely eliminated.
It triggers our innate fear of loss. We are so terrified of losing out on a zero-risk opportunity that we gladly accept terrible trades.
And you can see this fear of loss overriding basic math even in children. The Halloween experiment proves it beautifully.
Oh, the Halloween one. Remind me how that went.
So a researcher offered trick-or-treaters a choice. A kid named Joey comes to the door and is offered a trade. He can give up one of his Hershey's Kisses for a small 1-ounce Snickers, or give up 2 kisses for a large 2-ounce Snickers.
Joey evaluates the weight and easily does the math. For just 1 extra kiss, he gets double the Snickers. So he makes the rational choice and takes the large bar.
Exactly. But then little Zoe comes to the door and she gets a different dynamic. She can trade 1 kiss for the large Snickers, or she can have the small Snickers for absolutely free E.
Rationally, giving up 1 tiny kiss for a massive Snickers is still vastly superior.
But Zoe and 70% of the other kids in her group took the worst deal. The magic of free completely bypassed their ability to calculate value.
And it's not just kids. Companies leverage this cognitive glitch on a massive scale. Like when Amazon started offering free shipping on orders over a certain amount, sales spiked everywhere around the world.
Everywhere except in France.
Right, because the French division didn't offer free shipping. They accidentally charged 1 franc, which is the equivalent of about 20 cents.
And a 20-cent shipping fee is a massive, highly rational discount. But because it wasn't zero, it didn't eliminate the perceived risk. It didn't trigger that emotional surge.
So sales in France remained totally flat.
Yep. The moment Amazon realized the error and changed it to truly free shipping, French sales skyrocketed to match the rest of the world.
It makes you think about policymaking, too. The implications are enormous. Like if a government wants citizens to get preventative health screenings, lowering copay from $50 to $10 won't really change behavior.
Not significantly. But making it completely unequivocally free removes the cognitive friction entirely.
But, free isn't just a marketing trick or a policy lever. It is often the underlying currency of our human relationships. The moment you introduce money into a transaction that relies on free, you cross a very dangerous, invisible boundary.
Oh, definitely.
Imagine you are at your mother-in-law's house for Thanksgiving. She has spent all day cooking. The turkey is roasted perfectly, the stuffing is amazing, the atmosphere is warm.
Sounds lovely.
Right, and then at the end of the meal, you stand up, pull out your wallet and say, "Mom, for all the love and effort you put into this, how much do I owe you? Is $400 enough?"
Oh, no. You have just initiated a catastrophic family disaster.
Utter disaster.
And it perfectly illustrates the collision of the 2 distinct worlds we inhabit, social norms and market norms.
So break those down for us.
While social norms govern friendly requests and community favors, they are warm, they rely on trust, and they don't require instant reciprocal payback.
Whereas market norms are sharp-edged. They dictate wages, prices, costs, and benefits. You get exactly what you pay for.
Exactly. Slapping a price tag on a Thanksgiving dinner violently shoves the interaction out of the social realm and right into the market realm. Because introducing market norms immediately evicts social norms.
The book talks about that computer experiment with the circles, right?
Yes. Participants were asked to do a deeply boring, task-dragging circles across a computer screen. One group was paid $5 and worked reasonably hard. Another group was paid 50 cents, and they barely worked at all.
Because they applied market norms, calculated that their time was worth way more than 50 cents, and slacked off.
Exactly. But a third group was asked to do the task as a favor. $0.
And they worked the hardest of all 3 groups.
By removing money, the researchers activated social norms. The participants viewed the task as helping a community member, not as cheap, exploitative labor.
We see this play out among highly paid professionals too, like the AARP example. They once asked a group of lawyers if they would offer discounted services to needy retirees at $30 an hour.
And the lawyers universally refused. At $30 an hour, market norms dictate that the lawyers compare the offer to their usual $300 an hour rate, which makes the request seem insulting.
So the AARP shifted strategies. They asked the lawyers if they would provide the services for free.
And overwhelmingly, the lawyers said yes. Under social norms, they saw themselves as generous community volunteers rather than underpaid contractors.
Okay, but surely this is a fixable mistake. Let's say I make the catastrophic error of offering my mother-in-law the $400.
Okay.
Can I just, recognize the horror on her face, immediately put the wallet away, offer a sincere apology, and the social norm resets? Can't we just go back to being family?
You would hope so, but the research shows that once a market norm enters the room, the social norm is dead forever.
Wow.
Forever, pretty much. This was definitively proven in a famous Israeli daycare experiment. The daycare had an ongoing problem with parents arriving late to pick up their kids. So to solve it, management introduced a monetary fine for tardiness.
Which seems logical. Logical economics assumes a financial penalty will reduce the bad behavior. You increase the cost of an action, demand for that action goes down.
But tardiness actually increased.
Because they didn't feel guilty anymore.
Exactly. Before the fine was introduced, parents who were late felt guilty. That guilt was a powerful social norm regulating their behavior. The fine replaced that internal guilt with an external transaction. It shifted the environment entirely to a market norm.
The parents felt they were simply buying the right to be late.
Right. And the most revealing part of that experiment is what happened when the daycare realized the fine backfired and removed it.
The parents kept arriving late.
Yes. The social norm of guilt was permanently destroyed. They didn't feel guilty anymore, and without a fine, there was absolutely no reason to be on time.
That is fascinating.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it exposes a massive vulnerability for modern corporations. Think of companies like State Farm or Home Depot that spend millions marketing themselves as your family or your good neighbor.
Right. They are intentionally leveraging social norms to build deep brand loyalty.
But you can't operate in both worlds simultaneously. If a bank markets itself as your warm, fuzzy friend, but the moment your account dips, they hit you with a rigid $35 overdraft fee, the consumer processes that not as a business transaction, but as a personal betrayal.
It's a violation of the social exchange.
Exactly. The customer reverts strictly to market norms and often abandons the brand entirely out of spite.
So far, all the pitfalls we've looked at, the decoys, the irresistible pull of free, the mismatched norms, these are all external traps. The environment is tricking us.
That's true.
But that implies that if we just retreat into our own minds, away from marketers and social faux pas, we have a baseline of rational control. And the terrifying part of Ariely's research is that we absolutely do not.
No, we don't. This brings us to emotional arousal and the reality that we're completely disconnected from our own impassioned states.
We like to believe we maintain a consistent identity.
But under the influence of strong emotion, we become literal strangers to ourselves.
The Jekyll and Hyde experiment at UC Berkeley highlights this perfectly. Researchers wanted to see if rational, intelligent male undergraduates could accurately predict their own behavior when sexually aroused.
So they asked the students a series of questions while they were in a cold, dispassionate, rational state. They asked about their sexual preferences, their likelihood of engaging in immoral behaviors, safe sex, all of that.
And in this cold state, the students confidently predicted they would make highly moral, conservative, and safe decisions. They firmly stated they would always use a condom, never pressure a partner. You know the drill.
But then the researchers had the students answer the exact same questions while in a hot state. They were asked to sexually arouse themselves using erotic material before answering.
And the results were completely different.
It demonstrated a complete fracture in self-awareness. The students' predictions about engaging in bizarre sexual acts, ignoring condoms, and even engaging in immoral behaviors like date rape, those numbers more than doubled.
That is just terrifying.
In their cold state, they completely failed to anticipate how physiological passion would override their moral framework. They literally did not know who they were when gripped by raw emotion.
It's basically the equivalent of trying to go grocery shopping when you're starving, but applied to the most dangerous and important decisions of a person's life.
That's a great way to put it.
When you make the list after a big lunch, you rationally plan to buy lettuce and lean protein. But when you walk down the aisle starving, that rational planner is just gone, replaced by a version of you that leaves with 5 boxes of cookies.
Which is why relying on sheer willpower in the heat of the moment is a biological fantasy. Just saying no fails because the person saying yes in the hot state is effectively a different entity driven by raw neurochemistry.
So what do we do?
The only effective solution is to build architectural systems and pre-commitments before the heat hits.
Like what?
For example, knowing that teenagers make terrible, impulsive decisions when driving with friends. You don't just extract a promise from them to drive safely. You install an OnStar system that automatically alerts the parents or blasts the air conditioning if the car exceeds 65 miles per hour.
You engineer an environment that foils the bad behavior before the hot state can take over.
Precisely.
Which sets up another massive clash between our cold intentions and our hot impulses. Procrastination.
Oh yes, the classic struggle.
Right. In our cold state, we want to save money for retirement. We want to write that novel. But the hot state wants immediate gratification, wants to buy a massive TV on credit and mindlessly scroll social media.
Procrastination is just the act of surrendering long-term goals to the demands of the hot state.
And Ariely tested a structural way to defeat this, using his own MIT students, didn't he?
He did. He gave 3 different classes, 3 different sets of deadlines for their term papers. The first class had total freedom. They simply had to turn all 3 papers in by the last day of the semester.
Sounds nice in theory.
In theory, yes. The second class had dictatorial, evenly spaced deadlines imposed entirely by the professor.
And the third class?
The third class was given a tool to pre-commit. They could choose their own deadlines at the beginning of the semester while they were in a cold, rational planning state. But once they chose those dates, they were locked in with heavy grade penalties for being late.
So what were the outcomes?
Well, they perfectly illustrate the power of acknowledging our own irrationality. The class with total freedom performed the worst. The hot state of immediate gratification won out entirely. The class with the dictatorial, externally imposed deadlines actually did the best. But the class that was allowed to pre-commit to their own deadlines performed nearly as well as the dictated group.
Because by recognizing their own future weakness, most students used the tool to space out their deadlines. They essentially built a fence to protect their future selves from their own procrastination.
Exactly. And you can see this principle used brilliantly in the corporate world too. Ford Motor Company noticed they were bleeding service business because their maintenance schedule was just a cognitive nightmare. They had like 18,000 different parts needing service at random mileages.
It required way too much effort, so consumers just procrastinated.
Right. Honda, however, bundled their maintenance into 3 simple pre-scheduled milestones, like 5,000 miles, 10,000 miles, and so on.
And Ford ended up copying this architecture, removed the cognitive load from the consumer, and totally defeated the procrastination gap.
They engineered around human nature.
So what does this all mean?
It means we must discard the jet engine blueprint metaphor entirely. We are not perfectly rational machines. Our internal operating systems are deeply susceptible to external manipulation.
We rely on irrelevant decoys because we're just too cognitively lazy to calculate absolute value.
Right, we are blinded by the emotional safety of the word free. We destroy relationships by mixing social and market norms, and we consistently fail to predict our own behavior when hijacked by emotional extremes.
It sounds a bit bleak when you list it all out like that.
It does, but acknowledging this predictably irrational nature is not a surrender. It is actually a strategic advantage. Because by recognizing our inherent flaws, we can actively design our environments, build pre-commitments, and ultimately engineer better decisions.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a lingering thought directly inspired by these sources. The philosopher Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." It is the ultimate declaration of rational self-awareness and control.
It really is.
But if our preferences are largely just a chain of arbitrary anchors, if we are like Conrad Lorenz's goslings, blindly imprinting on the very first moving object we happen to see, is the life you've so carefully crafted actually a product of wise, conscious choices?
That's a heavy question.
Or is it just a random first imprint that has been running wild for decades? Think about the very first major decision you made in your career, or the initial dynamic you established in your longest relationship. Are you living your true preference, or are you just lining up behind a past version of yourself? Repeating a habit born from an invisible force. Keep questioning your own anchors. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.